Welcome back to the A4S Summit, kicking off today with a focus on the latest developments in reporting. I am Jessica Friis, Executive Chair of A4S, and I'm delighted to have everyone back with us. Over the next hour, we're going to be exploring the latest developments in the global sustainability reporting landscape from the perspective of regulators and standard setters. To get us started, I'm delighted to be introducing Jean-Paul Sauvé. He's the chairman of Iosco, the International Organization of Security Regulators, and he's recorded some of his thoughts to share with us all.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real privilege for me to stand before you, albeit virtually, and update you on what is happening in the field of sustainability reporting for corporates on the international stage. The sustainability reporting landscape is taking shape at a rapid pace. And in the 10 minutes of speaking time allotted to me, I would like to try to guide you through the latest updates and summarize the current state of affairs. And I would like to address the topic from various angles. As the recently appointed chair of Iosco, the International Organization of Securities Commission, I will of course focus on the role of Iosco and its expectation for sustainability disclosure. Iosco is the global membership organization whose membership regulates more than 95% of the world's financial markets in some 130 jurisdictions. It is recognized as the global standard setter for the securities market sector. And Iosco's strategy for sustainable finance is aimed at increasing transparency and mitigating greenwashing on financial markets. Furthermore, I would like to explain the key importance of international standards for consistent, comparable, and reliable sustainability disclosure for corporates, as well as for the audit thereof. I am closely involved in this ongoing initiative as chair of the monitoring board of the A4S Foundation, as well as co-chair with the US SEC of the monitoring group responsible for standard setting on audit, ethics, and imbalance. On the 9th of November 2022, at the COP27 meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, Iosco publicly outlined the various actions it is taking to mitigate greenwashing and protect investors in financial markets. And one of Iosco's key priorities is to contribute to the establishment of high-quality sustainability disclosure standards that benefit both issuer and investor. And it's instrumental because we are speaking about the trust from our citizen and consumer. Given the global demand on the part of market participant and investor, an ambitious but realistic timeline is of the essence. And Iosco therefore announced at COP27 that it expects both the disclosure and the audit standards to be ready for use by corporates for the end of 2024 accounts. Effective sustainability disclosure for capital market will empower market participants with the right information to support better economic and investment decision making. And in order to achieve this objective, there is still work to be done, let us be clear. But the good news is that since the establishment of ISSB, the International Sustainability Standard Board was announced at Glasgow COP26 last year, the A4S Foundation has delivered on its commitment to establish the ISSB board, to consolidate the voluntary disclosure landscape, to embed a global fund footprint, and to consult on proposed standards with a view to laying the foundation of a global baseline of sustainability-related financial disclosure. ISSB will issue its standards for climate disclosure and general requirement in early 2023. And the finalization of these standards will be an essential milestone in the establishment of a global baseline on sustainability disclosure. And then Iosco will move fast and assess the ISSB standards against its agreed endorsement criteria with a view to potential endorsement, as was the case 20 years ago with the IFRS accounting standards. Endorsement should be a real game changer for regulators around the world, setting regulatory requirements consistent with the global baseline. Maximizing interoperability across the world will be an important factor in Iosco endorsement decision. Iosco believes that close alignment is essential between the ISSB and those jurisdictions that seek to implement their own set of standards in order to ensure that capital flows to where it's most needed. It's also important to ensure that corporates at all stages of development, size and sophistication can apply either on a voluntary or on a mandatory regime the standards which have the potential to unlock capital. But let us be clear. We should be realistic and recognize that the needs, resources, and preparedness of jurisdiction and companies around the globe are not equal. And this is not only the case for sophisticated and emerging markets, but also for jurisdiction and companies in the same region and even the same sector. And both jurisdiction as well as companies are on a transition journey. And the voluntary uptake at a domestic level can have its role to play. And this is precisely why Iosco, working closely with the ISSB, has initiated a comprehensive capacity building program aimed at assisting securities regulators in their effort to adopt and implement the ISSB standards once they have been endorsed. The monitoring board of the IFRS Foundation, of which I currently chair, consists of capital market authorities whose mandates cover investor protection, market integrity, and capital formation. And the monitoring board enhances the public accountability of the IFRS Foundation. As this is done with financial reporting standards, the monitoring board will make sure that due process remains top of mind during the development of the sustainability reporting standard by the ISSB as well. And even though the work must advance at an appropriate pace, there can be no shortcuts for the due process. Again, we are speaking about trust. Audit is the cornerstone of a sound, sustainable financial markets that can mitigate greenwashing. And greenwashing could erode trust in sustainable investment at a time when it's crucial for financial markets to contribute to mitigated climate change. As co-chair of the monitoring group, which is responsible for public interest oversight of audit standard setting, I would like also to emphasize that the development of high-quality global audit, of quality management, and of ethical standards applicable to all providers for sustainability agents is key to preserving trust in the sustainable finance ecosystem. And both Iosco and the monitoring group have been and intend to continue working with the audit standard setter in order to, together with the ISSB, seize the momentum. It's equally important that the timing of the outcome be coordinated so that corporate issuers can start to produce reliable, independently audited information for markets in the end of 2024 account. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thanks to Jean-Paul for sharing that great overview of the work of Iosco and the global securities regulatory community. Really essential if we're going to accelerate flows of finance to sustainable outcomes. I'm really pleased to be introducing our next speaker, Jane Diploc AO, who's extremely well placed to explore some of the points raised by Jean-Paul in more detail. Jane is a former chair of Iosco, and in that capacity became involved in our work to establish the International Integrated Reporting Council, including playing a role in its merger with SASB and then into the ISSB. Having spent much of her career in the securities regulatory arena, over the past decade, Jane has also been active in work focused on sustainable finance and reporting, including as an ambassador to the World Benchmarking Alliance. Jane's really great to have you with us, and I'd really love to kick off by getting your reflections on the developments over the past year, building on the points that Jean-Paul has made.
Well, Jessica, there's been enormous energy over the last year towards the convergence of sustainability standard setters in particular. And the urgency for a global set of comparable, auditable, sustainable reporting standards has accelerated significantly. The urgency has been evidenced in calls from multiple stakeholders, global company directors, investors, CFOs, pension funds and other asset managers, regulators, stock exchanges, government policy makers, consumers, workers, amongst others. And it's fueled partly by the urgency of climate change, of course. Not only the financial stability element of climate change and the risks that it poses to them, but also that real life, physical, weather-related and other disastrous consequences that forebodes so much for the entire world. And the final realization of the potential existential threat that it presents. And it's really galvanized global momentum to find ways to address it. And I think it's just given a huge amount of energy to this process.
That's such an important reminder of why we're here and how reporting developments in the last year might be a part of the solution. One of the points Jean-Paul touched on was Iosco's work to support adoption of global sustainability standards. Now, you sit on a number of regulatory bodies in Asia and the Middle East. So I'd love to hear from you the kind of responses you're seeing to the ISSB's establishment and the potential mandatory adoption of global standards.
I think the ISSB rollout is going to work quite well. A number of Asian countries have looked to the IFRS Foundation and use IFRS reporting for their financial reporting. And so it's not unlikely that they will accept the ISSB for the sustainability reporting. There remains some entities which have started on the sustainability reporting journey with other standard setters, for example, with GRI. GRI is quite popular in Asia. And so that's why the alignment between GRI and the ISSB, I think, is an important issue. And I'd be very interested, and I will listen closely to what Ndidi has to say on that subject. But having said that, a lot of, well, at least in my experience, a number of jurisdictions have already started some sustainability reporting activity. For example, in Singapore, which is the place I know best because I sat on the board of the exchange as well as now the regulatory subsidiary, they've been on a sustainability journey for some time. And have used a mixture of allowed for people to report their sustainability reports in the format that they chose, there not being a global IFRS until now, the beginning of an IFRS sustainability matrix that was useful. So they've, but I think integrated reporting has also been quite successful in this area too. So I think they're on various journeys and various stages of journeys, but I believe that, and I'm confident that they will accept the ISSB arrangements when that final set of standards is actually produced, and I think they'll welcome that too.
Now, another Another point that Jean-Paul touched on was data quality assurance, greenwashing, quite a lot of the really key challenges that we face to get whole global reporting system right. Do you see a need for regulators to act in this area?
As how I put this together. Firstly, perhaps I'll be really quite bold on the audit and auditability issue. I am very concerned that there is a significant gap between the level of confidence of investors and other stakeholders in sustainability reporting when compared with the level of confidence in audited financial reporting. And that gap just has to be filled, and it has to, frankly, be filled by the capacity in the accounting profession to deal with the challenges of auditing sustainability information. It needs to be dealt with by the International Auditing and Assurance Board, and I'm delighted to see that they'll be discussing in December this year their first part of their journey to comprehensively address this. They did a little bit of work on extended external reporting a little while ago, but it only led to limited assurance and it didn't give a lot of confidence to recipients of that information. But obviously this is going to take some time, and I think that is an issue because there is an urgency about people wanting clear information and that they can have confidence in. Second point, I think, is that digitization is actually transforming every aspect of our life, from the way we set our ovens to every aspect of our life is now part of the digital revolution. And I actually think that it's absolutely vital that the leadership of companies, that's the directors, the CEOs, the CFOs, senior management team, have to be digitally literate and have to be able to address the need for and provision of digitization of the reporting of their business activities. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely difficult to actually make sure apples are compared with apples, and that the life cycle of the data is actually something which one can have confidence in. That there is somewhere accountability and professionalism in data collection, responsibility for the reporting of the data and its use to enhance the management of risks and opportunities, for early alerts. For every aspect of management, you need to have clear, accurate, credible data. And at the moment, with that myriad of murky spreadsheets prepared by Lord knows who some time ago, this is not going to give you the life cycle of the data in which you can have total credibility. So I really think that it's coming to the point where it's a fiduciary duty of directors that they have proper digitized systems of their reporting, sustainability reporting, properly tagged and assessed, and their financial reporting. And that makes also an integrated report in a much more interesting and profound way more possible. So that is a very important issue. And aligned with that is the question of capability. And do auditors and the auditing profession have the capability to actually check the life cycle of that data, the origin of it, the creation of it, who was responsible for it, etc. So I think that's an area that needs to be addressed. On the greenwashing, I do think that it's really important that NGOs and others who call out greenwashing be supported. At the moment, they can be pilloried and unrecognised and under-recognised, but this is a public service they do. But also, it's important to get the consumer decision-making much more informed. We're all influenced by social media, advertising that shouts from everywhere, from every device in our handbag. And as I was doing some reading for this session, I was horrified to read some of the brands I commonly use have been accused of greenwashing. Good God, I thought. I consider myself reasonably able to sort of discern these things. So I think we really do need to be able to have credible third parties to assess this. And, you know, dare I say it, after we've been talking about the Benchmarking Alliance, reputable benchmarking to enable proper comparisons to be made, because I think that's very, very important. But also, and this is obviously a common theme of my thinking, rigorous auditing will be part of this solution. Reasonable assurance, not limited assurance. And if the data doesn't match the hype, it should be revealed in the audit report to investors and other stakeholders. So I think that's part of the solution, at least.
Yeah. And I think as through that process, transparency around the quality of the information. So when somebody's looking at it, they can understand the gap. Now we're out of time, so I'm going to ask just one final question, Jane.
Yes.
You're a member of our advisory council. You've been involved in A4S as well.
Very proud to be
many
so
years. Bring a lot of different perspectives. So looking ahead to 2023, what are the key things that you think that A4S and all of the companies, investors, the wider accounting community we work with should be really focusing on to support progress in the area of sustainability reporting?
Have I got time to just quickly give you four?
Go for it. Four punchy thoughts.
One, embrace digitization. Absolutely vital. And it's an essential tool in the toolkit of all future leaders. So that's number one. Two, support the ISSB in its urgent journey towards sustainability reporting, a truly global sustainability reporting landscape, and give thoughtful, values-driven feedback to their consultation. Join their conversations. Support the IAASB in their challenging task to assist the audit profession to be guided and assisted in their vital role in ensuring sustainability information is done with the same rigour as for financial information and underpins confidence in the integrity of it. And above all, be cheerleaders and strenuous supporters of sustainability, including climate change mitigation and biodiversity, to ensure that the future generations will have the chance to experience the beauty and wonder of this planet as we do.
Thank you very much, Jane. It's really been a pleasure to speak to you. And I will look forward to posing some of the challenges, some of the points that you raised to our next two speakers, Ndidi and Judy. So thanks a lot, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Loved doing it. Thank you.
Huge thanks to Jane. I am now pleased to introduce our final two speakers for this session, looking at global sustainability reporting trends, representing two of the key global standard setting bodies. Firstly, Judy Kashevsky, Chair of GRI's Global Sustainability Standards Board, and Dr. Ndidi Noli-Adosian, Board Member of the I4S Foundation's International Sustainability Standards Board. Judy's been involved in sustainability reporting for many years, including helping to establish GRI 25 years ago. Ndidi also brings huge experience, in particular as a preparer, with past roles including leading sustainability efforts at the Dangote Group based in Nigeria. So welcome, Judy and Ndidi. And Ndidi, can I come to you first? The ISSB is just a year old or just over. What are the key needs to know from the past year?
Well, it's been a very eventful year for the ISSB. As you know, we were created at COP26 and started with the appointment of the chair and the vice chair, who issued two prototypes about the same time. We have since issued two exposure drafts, the first being the general sustainability related disclosures, and the second being the climate-related financial disclosures, highlighting risks and opportunities. We did a public consultation of those and are now speeding our way towards issuing the final standards as early as possible in 2023. We have consolidated the Value Reporting Foundation, which is made up of the Integrated Reporting Framework and the SASB industry standards of the US. They have been consolidated into the A4S Foundation. We are also working very strongly on interoperability. So the work that we're doing with GRI, we signed an MOU in March and are working continuously to ensure the interoperability between the ISSB standards and other standards, including GRI. We're working very closely with Europe as well, the European Commission, to ensure the interoperability again there. COP27 was very important for us because we launched the partnership framework with over 20 organizations already signed on to ensure that we're driving capacity building and advisory support as well. Obviously, our focus is on building a truly global baseline, so capacity building and ensuring that all jurisdictions are carried along is very key for us. We've opened offices in Montreal and Frankfurt, also offices in Tokyo, San Francisco, and London. We have issued statements from Iosco, G20, G7, the African ministers, the International Cooperation Forum as well, encouraging early adoption, which is obviously very important to us. And perhaps worth mentioning as well is just in terms of ensuring a truly global baseline, we have received the first indication of early adoption, which was announced at COP27, that of Nigeria, and we're working very strongly with other jurisdictions, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Egypt, Kenya, to mention a few on that continent, but of course also across different other jurisdictions. We will have, and this is great news, in December, our first full board meeting. So our last board member will fully come on board so that we have all 14 board members appointed by the end of this year, engaged and actively participating in board meetings. And so we're very excited also to work on the digital tagging of sustainability disclosures, which also helps adoption and a common taxonomy and terminology across our standards and the other standards that we want to be interoperable with. And of course, the last sentence worth mentioning is in terms of connectivity. As you know, we're a sister board to the IASB, and so we're working very strongly to ensure that our sustainability disclosures work in tandem with the financial disclosures as prescribed by the IASB.
Fantastic, thank you, Ndidi. So a lot to cover in just 1 year. But as you highlight, building off that foundation of the IASB, and then indeed with the consolidation of the IARC, SASB into the VRF, and then into the ISSB, I think that has really given a running start. Something that not everyone will necessarily know is that the IARC, and therefore now merged into the ISSB, was actually founded by GRI and A4S back in, that was 2010, so over 12 years ago almost exactly. And GRI's then CEO and myself were the first sort of co-directors, so it's really nice to see that evolution. Judy, from a GRI perspective, can you share what you would see as the key developments over the past year? As I said, it's a fast pace.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think just kind of picking up on all the activity that Ndidi just spoke about in respect of the establishment and the starting up of activities around the ISSB. I mean, there's been a kind of a parallel set of activities with GRI, but kind of very broadly as well. And I think one thing I would say is that the growth in participation in sustainability reporting globally is higher than it has ever been, and it keeps increasing. So we see that the uptake of the GRI standards, for example, by issuers of sustainability reports around the world has topped 11,000 on an annual basis. We have also, but probably more importantly, we have really started to see a kind of convergence in official and unofficial support for sustainability reporting in policy, in corporate practice in particular, and also in the kind of the lexicon of financial analysis as well. It's now what we have seen in the last couple of years. We no longer need to make the case for sustainability reporting in general. It is now accepted that sustainability disclosures are relevant. They're important for a broad range of uses by different stakeholders, and that they are that they must be subject to a degree of standardization to enable accountability, to enable clear decision making, and to to ensure that the right kind of outcomes can be reached by corporations and their stakeholders.
Yeah, and that's certainly, I think that real acceleration is something that we've seen through all of the stakeholders we work with, and particularly if you think of the CFO community, a real uptick, which really started with the TCFD, I think, and for some before then, of course, but finance teams really starting to get involved very heavily in producing some of the sustainability reporting, or supporting their sustainability colleagues to do so. Now, one thing that, of course, you will both be very, very well aware of is a very strong level of interest from preparers, investors, others on that whole question of convergence, interoperability, avoiding multiple different standards or talking about the same issues in different ways and just causing complexity, when the focus really needs to be on action and the information that can support action. So, Ndidi, if I can come to you first, you touched on that word that the ISSB has been using around global baseline. Can you say a bit about how the ISSB is approaching achieving that goal, and how you're working with some of the well-established standard setters in the voluntary space like GRI, which obviously is already actually mentioned in a lot of stock exchanges and regulatory requirements already as a starting point for sustainability reporting.
Thanks very much, Jessica. I mean, the ISSB was set up essentially. I think the tagline is to reduce the alphabet soup of standards. I believe one of the larger consulting firms indicated there were over 650 sustainability standards. And so in terms of one, you mentioned very nicely the TCFD. One of the things that we're doing in terms of building that global baseline is build on the 4 TCFD pillars of governance, strategy, risks, we say, and opportunities, and targets and metrics. And most importantly, to ensure that we build standards that are applicable across jurisdictions. And that will vary, obviously, in terms of level of preparedness, also what the existing jurisdictional requirements are in terms of sustainability. And of course, we're also trying to build standards, or committed to building standards, that will apply not just to large companies, but also to smaller entities, smaller preparers. That's really important to us. So that concept of proportionality is a very important, or scalability is another way of putting it, is a very important part of building this truly global baseline. What's also really important to us, and we call it the building block approach, is that we're building around, obviously having the International Sustainability Standards Board as a sister board to the International Accounting Standards Board means that we're building our sustainability standards focused on meeting investors' needs and ensuring that the sustainability disclosures provide decision useful information to investors. We're also building connectivity, leveraging the integrated reporting and integrated thinking framework, and building connectivity between the financial disclosures and the sustainability related disclosures. And so what's very important as well is that we're building them and making a concerted effort to remain in strong dialogue with other standard setters like the GRI and other jurisdictions that are already had already initiated their sustainability reporting ahead of the ISSB, like Europe, to ensure interoperability between the sustainability standards of the ISSB and other jurisdictional standards, and including the GRI. So in terms of building a truly global baseline, our intention is to ensure that we address that big issue of fragmentation by ensuring that ours is a building block that others can build around.
And just as a follow-up, in terms of in practice, how is that alignment or the work around alignment happening? Can you say a little bit more in terms of then how the ISSB is having concrete discussions with other standard setters to really get that alignment happening? I think often the devil is in the detail, to use the expression. So everyone can have really good intentions, but when it comes to independent standard boards being, working through the different issues, all of the different comment letters that you would both be receiving, it can be very hard to achieve that, particularly when everyone is working under really tight timelines. Judy, maybe I could ask you to come in there, both in terms of the ISSB and I know that you've been very closely involved in the recent EFRAG European Union standards that have just emerged. And then indeed, I'd love to just get both of your comments on sort of how that really practical detail. Judy, first to you.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I suppose the first thing that I'd like to say is that in reference to the kind of the very large plethora, very broad array of sustainability standards of various sorts, they're not all reporting specific, but many of them have elements in them which need to be appropriately reflected in sustainability reports in order for those to be robust and to be useful by stakeholders. The GRI standards are focused on the impacts that organizations have through their activities on people and planet. So it's purely that impact-driven sort of focus for the GSSB, but it is built on the foundations of a whole selection, a whole array of authoritative intergovernmental instruments that express some expectations of responsible organizational behavior in respective sustainability topics, such as the Paris Agreement, the ILO standards, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and a whole, many different kind of topic-specific sort of frameworks. So that all of that kind of impact sort of content is what GRI consolidates with those organizations that are the experts in those areas in order to express what we expect to see in organizational sustainability reporting with respect to those. And all of that, of course, is material that can be brought into many other different kinds of contexts as well. And you mentioned the work by EFRAG to develop the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. What I would like to say is that if there are established sustainability reporting organizations that use the GRI standards, the potential shift to the European sustainability reporting standards will be smooth, quite simple, because there's already a very significant degree of alignment between the GRI standards and the ESRS, where the topics overlap, where the topics align. There are a great many of the disclosures are drawn from GRI standards, for example. So the additional sort of effort required to reflect specific European regulation, for example, is fairly minimal and something that can be relatively straightforwardly added on to an established reporting program for organizations. And we are just as keenly focused, I think, as the ISSB is in ensuring that while disclosures always need to be fit for purpose, and we do have distinct purposes between these different frameworks, they nevertheless need to be aligned to the fullest extent that they possibly can, so that we have we're using the same terminology. We are describing sustainability topical areas in the same kind of ways, so that where things need to be distinct and need to be developed for distinct purposes, their alignment can be understood much more straightforwardly by users and also by readers of sustainability reports as well, so that implementation should always be sensible, and it should always make sense for users of reports why sustainability reports adhere to a variety of standards in some cases, but nevertheless tell a coherent story that can be used for accountability and for good decision making.
Indeed, did you want to add to that or share anything further in terms of the ISSB thinking? I know that there has been a reference in some of your recent discussions to thinking about how you might be able to explicitly point users of the ISSB standards towards GRI and the European standards, particularly where the ISSB, you've started with climate, there's a lot of other topics to work through, and that's going to take time. So maybe you could say a little bit about those discussions.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on Judy's comments, terminology is really important. So, I mean, the fact that we're all referencing the TCFD framework on the one hand, and of course, also in terms of climate disclosures, referencing the greenhouse gas protocol is very helpful also for preparers who are used to these frameworks. Same also with the CDSB framework. Industry practices is something else that we're working on, creating very clear alignment with the European Commission, with IFRAG. That's also under discussion. In fact, in November board meetings, what we also talked about is possibly specifically referencing GRI and ESRS. It was also brought up in the jurisdictional working group meetings. That's also under consideration. The other, I mean, language is really important. And so we are actually modifying language. For example, one of our terms, enterprise value, which created a little bit of confusion because it's used differently in different jurisdictions. We've removed that term. In terms of materiality, what we've said clearly is that we will lean on the IFRS accounting standards definition of materiality. So it's very clear where we position ourselves in terms of that definition. And yet, due to interoperability, what that means is that whereas we are very investor focused and materiality has been defined according to the IASB, we are working very closely to ensure interoperability so that reporting with a more double materiality or dynamic materiality focus can seamlessly connect with our focus, which is more capital markets and investors driven.
Yeah, and I do think that is going to be really critical because certainly what we've, I mean, even back when we were creating the International Integrated Reporting Council, this was one of the big debates, and with investors, you clearly have that full spectrum quite a lot of the investors in our asset owners network of pension fund chairs in their response to the ISSB consultation. I think we're really keen to underline that to have the full set of data to understand some of the risks and opportunities coming down the horizon and exposure around particular sectors, that broader materiality, understanding the impacts an organisation has on the world, on people and planet, as you highlighted, Judy, is a key insight. So I think for companies, definitely looking through both of those lenses is going to continue to be really, really critical. Judy, just one final question in terms of that materiality lens from a GRI perspective. You touched on that it's really focused on that impact lens. One of the other elements that has come through within that is also sort of sector specific and also who has the onus to understand and define materiality, whether it's very prescriptive and or whether the onus is on the company to really work through what issues might be material and then disclose accordingly. Can you say a little bit more about GRI's approach to materiality?
Yeah, sure, of course, yes. And as I said before, the purpose of the GRI standards is impact specific materiality, regardless of the financial consequences or otherwise of any of the material topics. We believe that topics are material for reporting in the sustainability context based on those impacts alone. However, we also believe quite clearly that most material sustainability impacts are or will become financially material over time. It's a process of understanding what that looks like, how a topic moves into the realm of financial materiality. And I think that is something that between the work of the ISSB, but also our MOU together to give substance to this idea of how these two framings, these two kind of starting points for materiality actually work together in a substantial way. And I kind of like to think of it as gears that mesh. That you have impact materiality and financial materiality. They are independent of each other, but they really only mean, they work and they generate power in concert together. So I think that's an exciting area of innovation that we have ahead of us, I think, together. You mentioned sectors and sector specificity. GRI has been in the process of creating sector standards based on its core GRI standards. We started, for example, with oil and gas and coal. We've now got agriculture, aquaculture, and fisheries. We've got a handful of other sectors that are under development right now. What these are for the GRI standards are essentially guidance around how to use the core GRI standards from the perspective of organizations within given sectors. So it doesn't necessarily instruct the reporting organization what disclosures they must make on certain issues, but it points them in the direction of which topics are typically understood to be material for that sector, why, how does materiality tend to look specific to that sector compared with just the broad universe of companies and organizations, and how can organizations be encouraged to report in a way that is consistent and comparable and reflects general practices across the industry? So what that means from the perspective of our sector standards is that the decisions around what to report and how remain very much the responsibility of the reporting organization, based on a clear understanding of generally accepted practice and the good tools and established approaches that the GRI standards bring to it, rather than a kind of very specific list of disclosures that may not in all cases be suitable to the specific organization. There's a role for both of these kinds of approaches. The GRI prioritizes the clear, transparent, and accountable decision making around disclosure for the reporting organization, rather than being very prescriptive.
And just to broaden that out, Judy, just in terms of some of the upcoming areas, we've got COP15 happening at the moment, which is the UN's biodiversity COP. The nature, that whole question of nature and understanding biodiversity, we know from the science, there's a nature crisis equal to the climate crisis, but much less well understood, much less well reported on. I know that's one of the areas that GRI has been doing some work to update the biodiversity standard. Could you briefly just say a few words about that standard and how it might help companies to take action on this area?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, just to support exactly what you've said, this is a topic that is really in urgent need of better disclosure and more consistent understanding of organizations' impacts. In response to which, the GSSB has been on a project for this earlier part of this year to revise the GRI topic standard for biodiversity very significantly. It's been a substantial overhaul of the biodiversity topic standard, and we have just released an exposure draft of this revised biodiversity standard that is available for feedback, for public comment until the end of February. And what we will do is collect all of the feedback that is brought in so that the final standard delivers the global best practice for transparency on biodiversity impacts. The revision process involved extensive engagement with other biodiversity frameworks and initiatives so that we can, from the very beginning, create that alignment between the various frameworks. So initiatives such as the IPBES, which is around ecosystem services, CDP, the Align Project, Partnership for Biodiversity Accounting Financials, and the Accountability Framework were all represented on the technical committee that led the review. The draft was also shaped by input from the Science Based Target Network, the TNFD, the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, and the World Benchmarking Alliance Nature Benchmark. Like all GRI standards projects, it was a highly collaborative process that brought in all of the kind of collected wisdom and good practice that's underway at the moment. I would also like to just encourage listeners to this to this session today, if they're interested in finding out more about what that looks like. There are webinars taking place on the 15th of December. They will be recorded, so you can come and listen to find out what's in the draft standard, and also how people can provide their feedback. We have also just recently published our draft work program for the next 3 years, which contains a whole array of prioritized projects and areas that the GSSB is interested in pursuing development of new standards and update of existing standards. It also includes a section on our ongoing collaborative efforts with other standard setters, including the ISSB and the EFRAG, European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, as well.
Fantastic, thanks, Judy. I think that gives some good near-term actions, but also some things to look out for on the horizon. And Didi, coming to you just to close out, the ISSB, I'm sure, is also, and I know is planning to consult similarly on what next. Have you got a summary of some of the things that people should look out for, how you're going to be approaching some of these additional topics, including around biodiversity in 2023?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our priority is going to be getting the first two standards out in the first half of 2023. So that's the sustainability related and the climate related disclosures and standards. Subsequently, and we've already initiated that, very early on, we printed and had a collaborative session with stakeholders, but also had deliberations on what agenda priorities will be. We'll be considering those, and the board papers that are obviously available online already begin to highlight, and we prioritize biodiversity, of course. As Judy's mentioned, this is a very important theme going forward. As you know, what we will focus on, our agenda priorities, will be the outcome of a consultative process, which we will put out early in the new year. So we'll be seeking for input on what it is we should focus on after S1 and S2. The industry standards, which actually already cut across a broad range of themes according to the 77 industry metrics that we already have and standards that we have adopted and embedded in the ISSB from the SASB standards. Those are now included as Appendix B, climate-related disclosures in S2. They are non-mandatory to start, but will probably become mandatory in the future, subject to a consultative process, of course. What's also very important to mention is that subsequent to the publication of the two standards, we'll be looking to have these endorsed by Iosco, and are already in very keen deliberations and discussions around that. I think what's really important for us at the moment is to ensure that we also are in the marketplace with capacity building support and advisory support. Just going back to that question of the truly global baseline and continuing to emphasize interoperability with other standards and, of course, connectivity with the financial statements. That's really important to us. And, you know, as was said at the beginning of this session, sustainability reporting is no longer a whether. It is now standard. And it's really important that we implement that building block approach so that it is embedded and incorporated into the consideration of risks and opportunities that have material effects on the financial resilience of organizations and indeed economies going forward. And in that regard, also the continuing collaboration between the ISSB and other organizations and standard setters, including GRI, is very, very important. And it's something that we prioritize and continue to spend considerable time working on. I think what's also really important is that we jointly focus on the digital tagging of the disclosures, so that also it's easier to cross-reference and it's easier to derive decision useful information for investors, which is where the ISSB also derives its mandate from. And, you know, we exist because the public asked the IFRS Foundation to undertake sustainability reporting. And we will continue to serve that public interest and that mandate of reducing the alphabet soup, which is why interoperability is so important. And lastly, of course, scalability and proportionality as well. Otherwise, we cannot achieve that truly global baseline where these standards are applicable across all jurisdictions, including developing and emerging economies, and also smaller entities.
Fantastic. I think that that's given us a really great overview of both some of the work that's happened over the last year, how you're both working together as well as with other really key regulatory and standard setting organisations, and what to look out for in 2023. For anyone who is trying to get to grips with, as Ndidi said, the diminishing alphabet soup, and I think that, as you said, Judy, it's not all standard setters, it's a whole range of different requirements or recommendations, some of which have reporting within them. you can look at A4S's Navigating the Reporting Landscape, which we've created with our Accounting Bodies Network. We'll keep that up to date, a really simple overview to help you really navigate the landscape, and also to look out for, is that how, I think as reporting really steps up and organisations need to make sure that they've got that robust systems and processes in place and that they are responding to different stakeholder needs. We're working with our CFO network and accounting representatives, as well as their sustainability colleagues, to produce some of the how-to guidance. So if you want to get involved in any of that work, do get in touch, and our CFO Leadership Network is going to be continuing to support efforts to achieve progress in this area, as well as help others to really take action. So thank you both, and thanks everyone for listening to this session looking at some of the global landscape. Later on, we will also be doing a deep dive into the US, so don't miss out on that. Thank you both.